I'm hyped about today's show.
I know our first guest. Who's this guy again?
He's from that Wes Craven movie.
Which one again?
The one where the innocent are taken out by a family that are a pure personification of evil.
Oh, Hills Have Eyes?
No.
People Under the Stairs.
Dude! Last House on the Left.
Which one?
What?
Which is the last house on the left? It depends on what end of the street you're coming from.
Really?
No, I'm messing with you. I know it's Junior from Last House. I was just doing a who's on first kind of thing.
Who's on what?
Never mind, Gen Xer.
Hey guys, how are ya?
Hey, Marc! Man, we're excited to have you here.
Absolutely.
Hey, I got news for you. The pleasure is on this side of the fence. I've been waiting for years to do this.
Years?
Yeah, I was so happy for the invite. I mean, who could believe it? When's Howard going to be here?
Howard?
Yeah, Howard. I can't wait to podcast with the Howard Stern.
Actually, it's Rick and Rich, MonsterKid Fury.
Oh, you guys. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
All right, everyone, we're all set to go.
Ooh, you have a nurse.
That's my wife.
Your wife's a nurse?
Never mind.
This is going to be a long podcast. I think I should have smoked 2 joints.
Hello, and welcome to our humble horror space, MonsterKid Fury. I'm Callie. Also here is Rich from MonsterKid Central.
Howdy.
And Rick from Film Fury.
Hello from the domicile.
Joining us today is special guest, Mr. Marc Sheffler.
Okay. So we're very excited to have you because you are our first guest, Marc.
Yeah, you said that in an email that I was going to be like your very first guest. It's thrilling because then you'll be able to see how bad I am and know how to fix it.
No. Neither of us are worried about that. Trust me.
So I think the thing that really struck me the first time I spoke to you when we set all this up is that you're actually a very funny guy. So how did you get your start in acting?
Well, how did I get my start in acting, or how did I get...
Or entertaining in general? Because It sounds like, did you start out in comedy and then move into acting?
I did. What happened was I was always kind of like a funny kid when I was little, in the sense that I would see comedians on TV and kind of repeat their language, repeat their words, repeat their material. And I was, kind of had like a thing for it, and I was a huge Three Stooges fan. So what happened was there was one event that actually locked me in on a rail to what I do. And that is on my 10th birthday, my 10th birthday approached, my dad came to me and said, look, you going to be 10, big decade. You go in a little boy, you come out a young man. I'll pretty much get you whatever you want. So a little backstory. My dad was a silk mohair suit wearing, pink diamond pinky ring guy with a Cadillac driving aluminum siding salesman. So when he said he'll get me anything I want, it was a much larger list than 2 sweaters and a pair of shoes.
Right.
So I, being a kid of my time, I knee jerked. I said the Three Stooges, and my father said, okay, I can't promise I'll get them, but I promise I'll try. So he called a friend who was the booker at a nightclub in Pittsburgh called the Holiday House, where the Stooges had performed. They'd come into town and to do like a week, 2-week gigs, and talked to them, and like one thing led to another, and suddenly my dad was on the phone with the Stooges representation in LA, and he made a deal. So he came to me and he said, look, I got good news and I've got not so good news. And I said, well, what's the not so good news? And he said, well, the Stooges can't get them until January when they're here. And I said, well, what's the good news? He said, the good news is I made the deal to get them. And I said, really?
Wow.
All you got to do is wait until January, and we'll celebrate your birthday in September. But the big celebration we'll have at a party. So what happened was he books a Holiday House nightclub on a Saturday in January. Stooges are there. They start doing their show to about 80 people, friends, family, friends of friends, just people who heard there was a private Stooge show and couldn't believe it, all kind of connected. And in the middle of the show, Mo stops the show and looks out at the audience and he says, "We're all here to celebrate Marc's 10th birthday. Where's Marc?" And I raised my hand and he said, "Stand up, Marc." And I stood up. He says, "Your dad tells us that you're Pittsburgh's #1 Stooge fan." And I said, "I am." And he said, "Well, we'll be the judge of that. Why don't you, come on up on stage with us?" I didn't know what to do. My dad leaned into me and whispered, and he said, "There's no time to explain this now. Just get your ass up on that stage." So, yeah, right? So he sent me up on stage. I went up on stage, and I knew all the Stooges material because I'd come home every day after school and do nothing but watch the Three Stooges for like 3 hours, right? So I knew everything. So I kind of integrated myself into what they were doing and assuming the Curly role. And they were shocked, like that I knew everything. Mo was like, they're all looking at me. And halfway through that, in the middle of that, Mo stops it again, and he puts his hand on my forehead, and he says, "I dub you the 4th Stooge." And I'm telling you, those 80 people sounded like 8,000 people. They
Wow.
backed tables and stomped their feet and applauded. And I thought to myself, then it was like, so closest like a 10-year-old kid could come to feeling the warmth of like what an opium session might feel like, right? Like, you take one hit and it's, I felt that. I felt this embrace. Like, it was like nothing I had ever felt in my entire life before. And in a funny way, it's a similar dynamic. Once you get that, if you have those receptors in your head, then you chase that dragon forever. And I go on stage really to just feel that embrace. But that was the day my future lit up like a fucking airport runway, man. It just I saw it. I saw it really clearly. Nobody else except me and my father. My father saw it, but nobody else saw it. I went to school, went to college, dropped out. I went to college with David Duke actually at LSU in the late '60s. I dropped out, and I said enough is enough, and I went to New York, and that was it. I just started. I just fucking said I'm gonna do it, and I went to New York and got a job in the Catskill Mountains as the stage manager of the Raleigh Hotel. And sought every comedian who worked that circuit multiple times, became friends with some of them, and one of them, a guy named London Lee, after I'd been there for about a year, offered me a job as his road manager. So I took the job, left the Catskills, went to live in Englewood, New Jersey, right across the George Washington Bridge, because he lived in Closter, New Jersey, and started out as his driver, his schlepper, running errands. And then I wrote a couple of jokes for him that he really liked. And then he made me part of his act. And I ended up doing like 150, maybe 200 club dates with him, including at the end 2 weeks at the Copacabana in New York. I was on stage doing stand-up at the Copacabana when I was 20 years old. And at the end of that gig, I left, went out on my own, started doing little clubs around around New York. And I met Bud Friedman from the Improv when I was like 20 years old, and some other people, and had a manager. One day walked into his office and he said, "I've got a movie audition for you." I said, "Great." He gave me an address, told me where to go, who to ask for. I found the building, went in, 2 guys named Wes and Sean, 2 young guys, my age, a little older maybe. They told me what they were doing, gave me a scene to read. I read it, went back to my manager's office, and by the time I got back to his office, which was in Rockefeller Center, they had called and said, "That's our junior." So
So of course that film that you auditioned for was
Last House.
obviously
Last House.
one of the most controversial
Yes.
horror
Yes.
films ever made.
Yes.
It was written initially under two different titles.
Yes.
When you read for it, was it still sex crimes of the century,
It
or
was.
had it?
It was there. It had actually the title that I remember is either it said "Sex Crimes of the Century," but then the script that I had a little notation on it that said "Night of Vengeance." So
Right.
yeah, so they were still fucking around with it was Krug and Company for a while. I mean, I remember seeing a whole bunch of different celluloids rather on what it would look like, and then
Right.
some marketing guy in at Hallmark came up with the kind of weird, unconnected yet weirdly mysterious Last House on the Left. It meant nothing. It meant absolutely nothing. Like
That seemed to be commonplace at that time.
it was like
There were a series of horror films that were shot under different titles, and it was a Mad Men sort of, Cadillac man who would
but
come up with the idea of,
it,
oh, we're not going to call it Book of the Dead. Nobody wants to read books in horror films.
right,
Evil Dead. That's your new title.
yeah,
So very much
it's
the same situation.
it's like the cinematic version of Haagen-Dazs ice cream, right? Which means absolutely nothing. But when Haagen
Right.
Dazs, it's like, oh, it's Haagen-Dazs. It's like, oh, Haagen-Dazs. Yeah, like, yeah, it's from that place in Haagen-Dazs. I don't know. It's like, who knows, right? So
Right.
yeah, it's brilliant. But Last House on the Left remains one of the most brilliant film marketing campaigns ever.
Oh, absolutely.
It was the first.
Yeah.
It was the first one to put clips on TV.
No, I did not know that.
Yeah, I think it was the
I didn't either.
first ad campaign to put actual clips on TV.
Now, when you and David Hess, the entire cast, auditioned for this movie, it wasn't a straight horror film at the time,
Fuck
though,
no,
correct?
it was like it's like revenge violence porn, and
Right.
we weren't going to do that. We just and we
Now, how far did they initially plan to shift into the porn? Was it going to be hardcore, or
yeah
was
they
it
were
just meant to show a little bit of
the,
titillation?
the exact instructions from the guy from Hallmark Releasing to Sean Cunningham were everything but male genitalia.
Right.
Okay,
So along the lines of Flesh Gordon, that type of thing.
yeah, but
Yeah.
everything but dicks. You couldn't see a dick. You could see everything but a dick. So so
Hmm.
so what happened was we all got together, the cast, the principals, and went to Wes and said, "Look, this is not really like, you know, we didn't want to do." After we all said yes, and we weren't trying to jam anybody up. We just felt that there was a better way to go. And
Right.
to Wes's credit, he took everybody's suggestion to heart. Went back and rewrote the script and came up with pretty much except for the scenes that we improv the last house that's on the screen. So he was a good guy. Wes. He was a sincerely good man.
Now, what was he like in terms of on the set? Was he extremely kind of since it was a low budget? Was he just okay? We got to do this, get this shot, move to the next one? Did
Okay.
he take more time than necessary on certain things, in your opinion?
Keep in mind that it was his first picture.
Right.
Okay, and I can tell you from having been a first-time director, and I knew a lot more than he did. I knew a lot more about film and production when I directed for the first time than he did. Wes was editing stuff before that, and he had never directed anything, so he was pretty quiet on the set. Actually, he was pretty. I'm looking because there's a machine. I may have to like lean over and close the door. Um, he's he was great to work with because he knew how to tell a story and he knew what he wanted. And once it locked into his head, once the underlying theme of what he wanted to do firmed up in his head, then he was the only person to have directed that movie because it was his
Right.
vision, right? Wes wanted to show violence for what it really was, and he was I don't say annoyed, but he thought it was inauthentic for a screen violence to appear not violent, and he had a great understanding of what it was and how to bring it forth. Remember, it was the height of the Vietnam War. It was like a lot of stuff going on that was being sanitized and whitewashed, and public wasn't, and it just we'd gotten too inured and too numb to the violence, and
Absolutely.
he just wanted to shove it in people's faces.
Well, back then on television, if you got shot,
Yeah,
you'd put your hand over and that was it.
that was it.
And I always thought that was a ridiculous thing to be teaching the viewer,
Yeah,
that, oh, it really doesn't hurt that much.
I don't know if Steve Joyner mentioned it, but I don't look at Last House as a horror movie. I did at one time for a lot of years, and then about 10 years ago, I saw it after having not seen it for maybe 3 years. So I was older then. I'm going to be 75 on my next birthday. So I was about 65, right? And I saw it, and I said, it's not a horror movie. What it is a skirmish in the ongoing class warfare that exists in our country. And I saw the dinner scene. I looked at the dinner scene a whole different way, because that's where my hypothesis, at least for me, becomes concrete. When Wes shows the physical differences between Krug and his thugs and the Collingwoods, and it's that difference in class, that socioeconomic difference,
Right.
and so that's what it is for me, and it'll probably stay in that place because it just makes more sense to knowing Wes the way I did. It, that idea makes a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, I can see your point to that. Although, if you don't mind, it's going to stay in the horror section
No, listen, everybody's
of
entitled.
my DVD
Everybody,
shelves.
everybody's entitled. Please, I'm just one person, who got very lucky, and it's the weirdest thing in the world. It's I've had this luck thing most of my life, especially professionally. I just happen to. I'm always, sometimes in the right place at the right time. I mean, I make one fucking movie when I'm a kid, and it turns out that it becomes a cult classic, and 50 years later, we're still talking about it.
And it's very interesting your theory that you've rediscovered after a period of time about it being a war of social classes. Because if you look at a lot of Craven's work, it's actually a theme that runs through it.
Yeah.
And I think that's what's interesting about Last House is it's a better written film, I think, than a directed film because he was still learning the craft.
Yeah.
So it's a very kind of scrappy, some of the camera composition is questionable many times, but that theme that you had discovered is something that kind of runs through The Hills Have Eyes in many respects
Huh?
because you have the primitive family and then the family on vacation.
People under the
People
stairs.
under the stairs,
Yeah.
same thing.
It's all
Even
glass.
something like the TV movie Invitation to Hell
Yep.
sort of has that concept coming into a very rich neighborhood and then the evil that's
Right.
present during that time.
Yeah. And
So when he came up with the idea, did you guys talk about the Virgin Springs at all, which he said was an inspiration for the initial story?
He told us, yeah. We all knew that the spine of the story
Mm-hmm.
came from an Ingmar Bergman fan. And I think we probably watched it. I think we all sort of watched it. I have a recollection of that, or at least I know Hess and I did. So yeah, I mean, there was no secret about that. He knew it. He knew exactly what he was doing, and he was smart because it was he didn't have to come up with plot points. He just had to adapt them.
Did any lasting friendships come out of the movie?
Oh fuck yeah! I'm good friends with Jeremy Rain. David Hess and I were like brothers. Okay, we until the day he died, we remained like brothers. Jeremy and I are good friends. Freddie Lincoln and I, until he died, we were good friends. And Marty Cove and I are friends. So
Oh, that's wonderful.
I talked to Marty last week. Uh, so, and we've stayed friends. Yeah, that's the thing, man. When you start out like that, there are people you meet that will be important in your life. And the trick is to recognize that and not let go. Like Hess and I'm sincerely mean it. We're like brothers, like very close. And Jeremy pals and Marty pals and Freddie, like a cousin.
Yeah.
Mr. Hess, he really seemed like a kind, genuine person because about, I guess, 13 years ago, my wife and I had talked about trying to do our own convention. And I just hit him up on Facebook, and he was very open with information. He was pretty much ready to be the headliner for the show.
David was
Talked
always
about doing a live commentary for the movie we were going to plan. And then I was at a Spooky Empire, and it came through on my phone that he passed away. And that was that was sad.
David was a complex guy, but at the center of his existence was an extraordinarily talented and wonderful human being. We were really, really close.
And a very accomplished musician as well.
Amazing. And
Yeah,
songwriting. Like,
yes, because he did a recording of All Shook Up before Elvis.
He wrote
right?
All Shook Up.
That is
Under
insane.
the name of David Hill. Look at the song title, the song credits. He had his writing name back in those days was David Hill, Hill.
Right.
So he wrote All Shook Up. He also wrote Speedy Gonzales.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
That is wild.
Yes.
I had no idea.
Yep.
How did you feel? Because you obviously saw The Hateful Eight.
Yes.
The Tarantino movie. What did you think about the incorporating of his song from Last House into the film? How did you feel about that?
I knew about that as it was happening because I was, one of David's sons told me that was happening. Great.
Oh, okay.
Sure. Of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Everything. He deserves it. His memory deserves it. He's extraordinarily talented and a brilliant guitarist. Like he didn't even lead with that. But we lived together for quite a while, and he'd pull out that guitar and start playing. I said, "I'd fuck you, man. This is like amazing. You just amazing." Yeah.
He was one of those guys. The cut of his jib, if you will. They don't make actors that look like that much anymore. Very rarely do you see someone that looks like that.
I can only tell you that David was authentically David. Okay, he was whatever you saw. That was real. There were no fake parts of David Hess. There were only different facets of the same person. He was really a complex guy, but just the best. I have so many stories about him. I mean, I can't even begin to I'll tell you one story, one Hess story.
I was going to say, what's the craziest story?
The
one that.
Well, I can't tell you that one because there's too many other people involved. But I'll tell you this one, which is one of the best Hess stories. So, right after we did Last House, off the success of it, David conned Hallmark into hiring us to write another script. I knew nothing about screenwriting, right? Like absolutely nothing. But they were offering us, David, like 10 grand, which was a lot of money in 1971. And we booked tickets to go skiing in Val d'Isère, France. We had this fantasy that we were going to go to the French. We were both skiers. David and I were both skiers. So we decided that we would take a typewriter, a bunch of paper, go to the French Alps and rent a place and ski and write and drink and play and ski. We were in a hit movie and we were like junior movie stars, right? So we were just thinking like that. So sure enough, we buy these tickets. We go to France, and we rent a condo. We're doing exactly what we thought we were going to do. So David's personality is such that when he got a few drinks in him, he would get kind of, I don't want to say belligerent, but he would get controlling and bombastic. Okay. So one afternoon, late afternoon, we were supposed to meet at a bar that was right alongside one of the slopes, French aperitif bar. And I go in, and David is sitting with a bunch of like 9 foot tall German skier guys. And there's a girl there, a cute little blonde, next to David. So I sit down, and I have a lot of hair on my chest. I'm one of these people who has a lot of hair on my chest. So David knew this, of course, because we lived together. So he had a couple of drinks, and when he got in that situation, he used to call me the monkey because of the hair on my chest. And it was the monkey this and oh, look, here's the monkey. And I said, oh, David, you've been drinking, huh? And he said, well, I had a few. Monkey, say hi to Hans, Fritz, Ulrich, and So, okay, sure, right? So I don't feel comfortable there. David is big, right? But I'm the little Jew, and I don't fit. We're not so far from World War II. These guys, they're looking at me. And so he introduces me to the girl, who turns out to be an American girl who's been traveling through France, hooked up with David, and David has promised her that she can spend the night in our condo, with him. So,
such a deal.
Right. So, a couple of steins of beer later, the girl leans into David and she says, David, I've been traveling all day and I really'd like to take a shower now. Can I go back to your condo? And Hess, in absolutely primetime Hess, points to me and says, you bet, the monkey will take you back. So he turns to me and he says, monkey, take her back to the condo and show her where she can take a shower. And I said, absolutely, David. Happy to leave that fucking place because now I know I'm not on a train anywhere at the end. So, so, I mean, who knows these people? I don't know, So we go back to the condo and I'm not really thinking of anything, right? So I opened the door and I said, there's the bathroom. There's the linen closet where the towels are. I'm just going to watch some TV. And refrigerator, there's some food. Just make yourself at home. David, he's drinking. He should be back, maybe by Thursday. So anyway, I hear the water run and I hear some noise. And suddenly I look up and there's the girl wrapped in a towel, wet, looking at me. And she says this, I've been in a car all day and I have this pain in my neck. Do you think maybe you could rub it out? Like maybe it's killing me. So I thought to myself, I may be 21, but I'm no fucking fool. And inside my head, I started to laugh because I knew what was going to happen. So she sits down on the couch and the fucking towel drops away and she was very attractive. And I thought to myself, okay, so, I don't know if it's the definition of a nanosecond, maybe, but from the time I touched her with my hands to the time my penis touched her was probably a nanosecond, right?
Right.
So we're fucking our brains out, and all of a sudden the door screams open, right? Boom! And I hear from the hallway, I'm home! And she looks at me, and her eyes are like this. She said, you said he wasn't going to be here for a while. Don't worry about it. So Hess comes in, hits the fucking lights, and there we are, bare-assed on the couch. I mean, there was literally no time to do anything. I just said, just stay where you are. Don't move. And I'm literally, and the lights flip on, and there's Hess, and he looks, and he goes, "What the fuck is this?" And I looked up and I said, "Well, David, apparently the monkey is having his banana peeled." And
Oh, my.
Hess and Hess just looked at me and just went like, all right. How much more time do you need? Just like that. I said, come back in an hour. Okay. And he left and he can't, so that was Hess. I mean, that's David. Like,
What a great story.
yeah.
So in between the debauchery, did you guys finish your script?
Oh, yes, we did. And
Which was what?
yeah, it was some mystery about a dirty police captain who was really a serial. It was not, knowing what I know about screenwriting now, it was a gift of $10,000 and a lot of fun because it was stupid. It was just not.
I don't know. I would love to read it actually, though.
I
It's,
have
it
no
doesn't
idea.
sound terrible about it.
So, yeah, to answer your question initially, you make friends, and in situations like that, and you stay friends with them.
And Craven, did you stay in touch with him over the years?
Yeah, occasionally. I saw Wes the last time about a year before he passed away. Somebody in Burbank, an art gallery in Burbank, an artist did a multimedia rendering of moments from Wes Craven films, including Last House. So like a 3D thing, like a model, and they wanted Wes to attend. So somebody who knew him invited him, and he said yes. And then somebody who knew me invited me, and I said yes. And we, it's funny. I was just thinking about it. I go to this gallery in Burbank with my wife, and we're in there, and it's one of those galleries that's narrow but long, right? It's like a block long in depth, but it's narrow in width. So I go in, the owner greets me, and I sign some autographs for him, and I look around and I don't see Wes, and he said, "Yeah, he'll be here in a little while." So the guy shows me the artwork, and it's pretty nice, it's pretty interesting. And then I turn around and I see Wes walk in through the front door, and he sees me immediately, and he just shakes his head like this, right? I remember he shook his head, and I kind of met him halfway, and he and I got into a very warm catch up. I hadn't seen him in several years. Kind of conversation about what's going on and what are we doing, and have you talked to this, just the kind of thing that people who know each other for decades do. And I didn't realize it, but the entire gallery had stopped talking. And when I looked to kind of like look for my wife, I looked, and there were like 60 people huddled watching Wes and I talk.
That's wild.
And then I became like really self-conscious, and I gave him a hug, and I said, I'll talk to you later. And, that was it.
The house in question,
Yes, sir.
Was that were the sets practical or
It was
were
John Cunningham's mother's house.
okay? So what you see is what you got.
What you see is what you got. Yes.
Wow.
That was Sean's mother's house.
And when you shot in New York, did you guys actually have permits, or you just kind of guerrilled it and ran out there?
We don't need no sneaking permits.
Yeah, that's what I thought. Yeah.
I don't recall. They may have had some. I don't know, but I don't recall. I don't recall an AD walking around with a clipboard with copies of permits on it.
Yeah.
Now, guerrilla's the best way anyway.
Well,
on
that
the early films.
You got to remember that one of the things I was talking about with Marty Cove last week was we were talking about that time in New York, right? So that time was really like the birthplace of the American independent film movement. If you look at the films that came out of there during that time, forget Last House, Joe, right, with Peter Boyle, Deep Throat with Harry Reams, whose real name was Herb Stryker, who we all was part of it. Herb was actually the original junior. He was hired before me and left the Last House to go do Deep Throat.
Interesting.
Wow.
A lot of people don't. That's a small, little known factoid.
See, if I had been you, I would have said that they replaced the character because you were bigger.
Yeah, but I go for the joke, not the choke.
So you and David and the entire cast, for that most part, become sort of mini stars after the movie starts making some money.
Weird. That was pretty trippy.
Did you start getting offers for other films, other horror films, or just any New York lensed films at that point?
Yeah, some I had done some commercials, so I got a lot more auditions and did a couple of more commercials than I normally would have been able to do. I mostly came out of Last House really wanting to be a writer and wanting to do my stand-up act. So I didn't really pursue. I guess I should have, right now that looking back. But I found I loved being up on stage. I still do. I just loved being up on stage in front of people. And I started at the Comedy Store in February of '76. I did my first spot there, and by March, April, I had a manager. Well, I had William Morris as an agent when I got to town. So, yeah, I started like going on meetings, pilot meetings, and I began working regularly the next television season, and didn't stop for maybe 20 some years.
Yeah, I was gonna say you did a lot of comedy,
Yes.
Which I have too, and I've always find it bizarre that the genre that I truly love is horror, but I also always explain to people that it's really the same thing. There's a build up to a scare, there's a
Like a
build up
married
to a
person.
joke. Yeah, and what you're doing is you're waiting for the audience to react.
Exactly.
You wrote for television at an interesting time when how do I say? Well, when actors weren't getting insane amounts of money, where
Right.
writers were certainly not getting an insane amount of money. Um, Yet I always felt that I hate to be one of those old guys, but I just think the writing was better.
Well, something. I think that I think when you were my age and my level of writer in the genre sitcom, let's just isolate on sitcoms for a sec. When you're somebody like me, there was the medium had been around long enough that there were experts. I was very lucky in the sense, again, my luck, that I had some mentors early in my career who were the stars of their era. One of my mentors was a writer named Arnie Rosen. Arnie Rosen goes back to like Sergeant Bilko and Nat Hiken, who created Sergeant Bilko. And if you know anything about Sergeant Bilko, the most famous episode of that series is when they induct a monkey, a chimpanzee, into the army. It's a classic episode. Well, my friend Arnie Rosen, my mentor Arnie Rosen, wrote that. That was one of his episodes. So I had him as an early mentor. And then in the variety, I had producer Ernie Chambers as a mentor. And as I progressed in my career, I worked with older writers who were really well known and skilled. and then ultimately it became partners with a man by the name of Sam Denoff, who, with his previous partner Billy Persky, were the original two of the original writers on the Dick Van Dyke Show, and went on to create That Girl from Marlo Thomas.
Yep.
I knew who Sam Denoff was when I was a kid because I followed that and used to watch the Dick Van Dyke Show. And I remember watching the Dick Van Dyke Show. I watched it. When I watched it for the first time, I looked at my father and I said, "There's a job for this? People do this for a living?" And he said, "Yeah." I said, "Oh, yeah." And I got excited. So imagine me being like, like a 13, 14-year-old kid and reading credits and looking at these people in an office making jokes, having fun. It's not work. They're there. They're, and I want to do that. And, the continuation of the Three Stooges thing, right? So
Yep.
imagine being me, knowing who Sam Denoff was, and then years later, being a working writer in the business and getting a call from a senior vice president at NBC who I'd worked with all the time, who said, "Hey, listen, Brandon, that's Brandon Tartikoff, who I had a wonderful relationship with. Brandon wants to set you up with Sam Denoff." I said, "What?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "We have a deal with Sam, and Brandon thinks you and Sam would get along. So he wants to set you guys up." So Brandon Tartikoff arranged the first meeting between me and Sam Denoff, and then Sam and I ultimately became partners for 10 years. So
Wow.
I'm telling you, man, I have and am having the most amazing ride for someone who I graduated college. I had 3 life goals in place. 3, right? Not graduated. I didn't graduate. I dropped out. When I dropped out of college, I don't know why I said graduated. Graduated high school, not college. I wanted to graduate college, but they didn't like me. So I had 3 life goals in mind. I wanted to smoke as much weed as possible. I wanted to sleep with as many different women as possible. And I wanted to make just enough money to afford the weed and the women.
Right.
At 75, now I look back on my life and realize that in every fucking category, I have greatly exceeded my own expectations. So I wake up every day just really happy. I'm happy, man. Like, how could I not be happy?
Yeah. That's the same way with me in my career. I just, you and it amazes me that there are people, and you probably know some of them, who believe that saying that you were lucky is an insult to you because it involved other people helping you. You didn't do it on your own. And I always thought, without luck,
No,
I have no
I
idea
was
where
lucky.
I'd be.
Of course I was lucky. I'm not.
Yeah,
Now, look, you can be lucky to get a job, okay? But once you're there, if you can't deliver, then there's no amount of luck in the world unless your father owns a studio that
exactly.
you're gone after the first option period, right?
Right. So the talent carries you through that job, even
Yeah,
if you were lucky to get it.
yeah. I listen. It was a stroke of luck that I walked into my manager's office and he sent me on a movie audition. That was just a fucking random chaos of the universe luck, right?
Yep.
It was a stroke of luck that Wes and Sean liked me, okay? Because we all know, you put a million actors and a million producers and directors in a room, and believe me, most of them are not all going to get along and not want to work with each other. So that was a stroke of luck. It's all these moments in my. It's like I look at life as like a raging creek, right? You're born, and once you're born, everything is designed to kill you.
Yep.
Everything is designed for you to not take another fucking breath. So, you know, every time I needed a stepping stone to get across the creek, it was there. And that to me is luck. Go ahead.
I had a question for you. In 2009, you did write an article comparing Last House on the Left, the remake, with the original. How did that come about?
I had known a guy, Xavier Mendick, who is a professor of film and specializing in horror film over in England, and we had some wonderful, chats, and somebody who knew us both put us together talking about films and whatever. And he asked me to write an article for an online magazine that he was doing. So I did, and if you've read it, you know how I feel about it.
Now, had he passed away by the time the remake came out?
No, Hess didn't, I think, pass away. Wait, when did he pass away? Was it 2011?
Yeah, so Last House had been out, the
Yeah,
remake.
yeah.
Do you recall his thoughts on the movie at all?
I don't think he liked it. And we both know Garrett Dillahunt, who played that crude character, who's a wonderful actor,
Oh, definitely, yeah.
So, but I don't know. I just, if you read the article, my feelings haven't changed. I just don't think, one of the things about Last House, I've said this a lot of times, and it doesn't change. There was a reason that it worked, and that was we weren't famous actors. Nobody knew who we were. You couldn't look at any of us and say, "Oh yeah, that's the guy or that's the woman from this." Wes shot it in such a way that it was kind of like, like documentary, like it was a documentary about a really bad crime that's happening in real time. So
Right.
there were a lot of things about it. We had a cast. We gelled. If you look at the four of us, David, Jeremy, Freddie, and myself, we kind of fit together as that kind of toxic anti-family family. Like dad,
Yeah.
mom, kid, crazy uncle. It just worked. And that's something that like you can take a bunch of coins and put them on a tin plate, throw it up in the air, and take a picture, and it'll look one way. You can do that a billion times more, and you're never going to get the same picture. So that's what I think. It's just so in the remake, there was an artificiality to it. It was like it looked to me
I
just like
agree.
a deal that produced a picture rather than an idea that produced a film. So I don't know. I didn't think it was very good. I don't think it would stand alone without Last House, the one being in existence. And if a film doesn't stand alone on its own merit, then it's not a good film.
Exactly. And they walked into that film, like you said, Wes had a certain theory in mind when he wrote the script. He wanted to talk about the violence in Vietnam, he wanted to talk about counterculture, things of that nature. And in the remake, they have nothing to talk about.
Correct.
They're just taking everything from the surface level and cleaning it up, hiring good-looking actors. Tony Goldwyn, great actor, I love him to death, but he really didn't bring anything to that role that I thought an actor of his caliber could have.
It was gimmicky.
Yes.
And I'm not a fan of gimmicky anything.
Same thing with Straw Dogs. I turned it off after about 15 minutes because I'm like, once again, did you watch the Peckinpah film? Do you understand the power of that film?
Yes.
And obviously they did not. Now, there was talk of it was advertised on a VHS tape at one point, a sequel to Last House on the Left. Did you know anything about that? Was David ever contacted?
Something he mentioned, I think years ago, mentioned something to me about it, but nothing came to fruition.
Right. So. And what about David Hess's opportunity at directing To All a Good Night?
Yeah.
Were you around for that?
I wasn't around for that. No. So I have no comments on it. Not good or bad. Pardon me?
Did you play Junior as a bad guy?
No, I played him for what I thought. I once I sort of established some backstory in my head. I played him for the lost soul that he was. Like,
Right.
I think I always thought, like, immediately that Junior's death was inevitable. It just he just was he had no control over his life. He wasn't a bad person, and he was being manipulated by a really bad person. So
Right.
I think in the world of grand Shakespearean tragedy, I think the only place he could go is down. So
Right.
I played him. That's how I thought I played him anyway. Like, just a lost soul.
When you're introduced to those characters, being Krug and company, you just kind of dropped in.
Yeah.
We don't necessarily have backstories on everyone. Did Craven and Cunningham, did they give you any type of backstory? Did you guys just formulate your own idea of how this ragtag group of criminals got together?
The latter. We just sat around and shot the shit and made it up.
Okay.
Would you care to give us a little bit of that?
No, it's just we just decided, based on that voiceover that Sean did at the beginning when the girls are driving. It's supposedly, like a radio bulletin.
Mm-hmm.
We just looked at that and said that, we hypothesized that Krug probably killed Junior's mother, and took Junior. We made up this thing where he killed his mother and took Junior and disappeared. Raised him to be a criminal, but then Junior just didn't have the criminal gene, so he could never be the poisonous apple of his father's eye. There was always something good in him, but being in that family, to have anything good in you was actually something bad. So, in the same, in Freddie and, like Freddie, I think Freddie and David made up a story where they knew each other from a stretch in a penitentiary. And Jeremy and David made, we all had something, we all knew to do that, right? So that we could, I don't think we all were as, we weren't as sophisticated as everybody is these days for us, but we knew to in order to give any of the performances the shot at any texture, we had to create the illusion that these people all had a past life together.
And
Right.
how difficult were a lot of those scenes? Obviously, it's a disturbing film. It's disturbing imagery.
Well,
What kind of tone did the set have when you were doing a lot of those sequences?
not really horrible. It was kind of just fun. You got to remember that this is 1971. We're making a movie. Yeah, there's a lot of blood and guts and gore and shit, but we're making a movie,
Right.
So I think that most of the time, except when the cameras were rolling and we got serious about it, I think most of the time we were just tickled pink that we were actually making a movie.
Right.
We couldn't believe it. None of it. I mean, Freddie had more experience than anybody else does. So he had made lots of movies before, but not David, me, or Marty, or Jeremy. So
Or Wes, for that matter.
West, yeah, especially West for that matter, right? So I think we just, we didn't know what we didn't know. So that being the case, we could just do anything. And that's what we did. No one stopped us. Wes made the film he wanted to make, given the money he had to make it.
All the controversy that followed it, were you expecting that, or
we were?
No,
David, Freddie, and I were expecting nobody to ever see this film. We saw a screening of it, of an answer print, Answer print is like the final version.
Yep.
We saw a screening of an answer print at Filmway's post-production house on the west side of Manhattan. It was cast and crew screening, right? So we go there, go in and watch it. We came out and we looked at each other and said, you know, it was a really great meeting, the three of us. We're going to be friends forever, but nobody is ever going to see this piece of shit. So lo and behold, they released the film in the theaters, the drive-ins that Hallmark owned in New England. And then out of nowhere, Roger Ebert writes a 3.5 out of 4-star review of Last House. And it fucking blows up. I walked into Sean Cunningham's office like the next day, you know, to say, hey, you hear about this Roger Ebert review? And he was running around like a lunatic trying to get 1,100 prints made. And this was back in the day where you just couldn't digitally send a film. You actually had to process 1,100 prints, which was absurd. But
Right.
he got an order for 1,100 prints.
At that point, are you recognized on the street?
We started,
out in public?
yeah, Hess and I started to get recognized. And, you know, there are these little benchmark moments. Like I got sent back to, I grew up in Pittsburgh. So I got sent back to Pittsburgh by Hallmark and the distributor to do some hometown press for the opening of it. Once again, I'll tell you a story that just shows this, how everything is connected. I told you a little bit about my dad. So there's a theater in downtown Pittsburgh. It's called the Benetton now, but it used to be known as the Stanley Theater. It was one of those grand, ornate, kind of old Stanley Warner kind of theaters, you know, with the carvings and the gargoyles and the balconies and the red velvet seats. It was once a burlesque house that converted into a movie house sometime in the 40s. My father's cousin was the general manager of Stanley Warner Theaters for the entire Pennsylvania, West Virginia, Ohio triangle. About like 25, 30 theaters. And we used to go to all of them as family, so we just would walk in. So what happened was I was watching with my dad, Jerry Lewis in The Nutty Professor.
Mm-hmm.
And the movie's over. We're walking out, and I say to my dad, wow, what must that be like to have that job, to be like Jerry Lewis, to be in the movies? How great would that be? So my dad said to me, well, maybe you'll find out someday. And I said, seriously, me in the movies? You got to be kidding. And my father, who is not known for being a serious man, grabbed me by the shirt and said, look, somebody does that every day. Why not you?
Oh, that's great.
I had no answer, right? I said, yeah, why not me? So cut to the chase. 7 years later, when I was 21, and Last House on the Left is going to open in Pittsburgh, the theater that it was going to open in was the Stanley. Okay? So my father hired a limousine and took me there, and there I was with my dad in that place where he said that I could be up on the screen in a movie, up on the screen in a movie. So
That's
pretty trippy shit.
yeah.
That's beautiful.
I have a similar story in a way, which was that the magazine that my father used to buy for me when I was a teenager, I ended up writing for,
Oh, there
and he got to,
good for
you know, it's one of those things you cannot
you.
buy that kind of
We made
way to thank them.
we made a deal. We made one of those deals, right? He said, I said, okay, I'll tell you what, I'll star in a movie up on the screen. How about that? And he said, and when you do, I'll hire the limo to bring us to the premiere. And shit, that's what fucking happened. Okay. So
Yeah.
these moments that I look back on and I say, wow, that shit really, that did happen. That was, I'm not kidding. You know, that really happened. My first wife was a huge Anthony Hopkins, is a huge Anthony Hopkins / Hannibal Lecter fan, right? Like she fucking Silence of the Lambs was her favorite picture. and she just would go nuts, you know. So I found out one day that we were having Anthony Hopkins on the show as a presenter. So I tell my wife, and she said, "Oh, I got to go with you. I got to go with you. You got to get me a picture. You got to get me a picture, please. Can I?" I said, "Of course you can go." Okay. So there, if you've worked on shows like that, you know there's always a writers' table with writers and co-producers, like very close to the wing, so that if anything needs to get backstage, you get backstage quickly, right? So
Right.
I'm Misha on Showtime. We did, Sam and I did the People's Choice Awards a few times. So every time we did it, Misha, in addition to writing, Misha would send us out as like schmoozers, like ambassadors. So we were like talent schmoozers because Sam knew everybody, and I knew a lot of people. So we were good at that because we were very friendly faces, and they would set up whatever studio we were, they'd set up these giant green room bars, like restaurants in the back for the talent to like mingle. So it was like a lounge. So I was back in the lounge, at the bar in the lounge, talking to Carol Burnett, Michael Douglas, and Steven Spielberg. Michael Douglas was doing a tribute to Steven, and we were all kind of talking about it. And I knew Carol because she was a friend of Sam's, and I had met her before. So we were all kind of just standing there. So I look towards the door and I see Anthony Hopkins come in, talk to a page, a Universal page, and Page points to me, and Hopkins comes over to me. This is what happened. Everybody says hello to him, and he looks at me and says, "So, you must be Marc." I said, "Yes, I am." He said, "Tony Hopkins. Nice to meet you. Tony Hopkins." Pleasure. So he said, "Well, looks like a lovely crew tonight. Should have a good show." I started thinking of my ex-wife, right? I said, "Tony, I have a little favor to ask you." He said, "By all means, bring her back." I said, "How did you know that's what I was going to say?" He said, "It's always that." So I excused myself from Steven Spielberg, Carol Burnett, Michael Douglas, and Tony Thomas. I'll be right back. So I go out and I grab my ex-wife and I say, "Listen, I need your help. You got to come back here. Something happened. I need you got to help me." She says, "Well, what? You're being vague. What do you mean?" I said, "I just need your help. Can you help me? Can you not help me? Don't help me. I don't care. I think you're going to want to help me." So she said, "Yeah." So she comes with me. I take her backstage. I take her through the wings, and I take her into the room and sees Hopkins at the bar. Now, Carol Burnett's gone. Michael Douglas is gone. Hopkins is standing alone talking to Steven. I go right over there and I said, "Tony, this is my wife, Jan." And he looks at her and does, "Tony Hopkins, nice to meet you." And she's like, "Ha, ha, 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 ha." Like this. And she's literally doing that. And I said, "Time to go." And Hopkins laughed. He says, "Pleasure to meet you." She said, like that. I walk her out, and she said, "What was that? What was that?" I said, "You said you wanted to meet Anthony Hopkins. Well, you could have told me." I said, "If I would have told you, you would have been on the way in. Okay? I couldn't have that. So go back to the table. I'll get you his autograph, and that'll be that." So now I walk back in to the green room where the bar is set up, and Steven is standing alone. So I go back to the bar to get the drink I had, and I said to him, "Man, I'm glad I got that over with." And he said, "That was your wife?" I said, "Yeah." And he said, "She didn't want my autograph?" I said, "She didn't even see you." He said, "What do you mean?" And I tell him how I'm a fan. And he said, "Well, what am I, chopped liver?" I said, "No, man, but you ain't Hannibal Lecter either."
That is amazing.
All right. So what intrigues me is that you enjoyed being on stage.
Yeah.
You enjoyed performing.
I do.
Yet you chose the loneliest job in the profession, which is the reason that I chose it. I chose it so I didn't have to deal with people, and you've gone in the opposite direction. Why?
Well, they're different. I think because they're really different sides to me. Um, I go on stage, like I said initially, is I'm chasing that feeling that I got when I was 10, being on stage with the Stooges. I'm no longer looking for women. I used to go on stage pretty much just to look for women, but I don't do that anymore because I'm happily married. So I don't do that anymore. So now I just go on stage again. Now I'm back. I do stand up sets every now and then with some comedian friends of mine who get jobs and say, "Hey, you want to do 15 minutes? You want to do 20 minutes? I got a show here, and they pay me a little bit of money, and I don't care. It's just a thrill of doing it." So yeah, I know. It just because I found that I'd have more control over my life. I can't believe I'm saying this as a writer, because you have more control over your life as a writer than you do as a comedian. Because at least as a writer, you can get some employment that will put you. You'll be able to feed your wife and kids if you can get into that.
Right.
You get into that echelon where you're on a rotation of writers who are working all the time. You make a very good living.
Absolutely.
So, out of all the jokes you've written, tell us your favorite one.
Oh man, I don't know. That's weird. That's a weird question. I know that sounds like an easy question to answer, but that's a weird question because my mind just put my mind in overdrive. Let me think about it. I know because I've written thousands and thousands of jokes, that my stand-up act now, I come out on stage, like sometimes I'll choose to do this. I'll come out on stage and I'll say to the audience, I can't believe I got here. I was late, running late, on the phone with my uncle. 96 years old. Yeah, 96 years old. My father's brother, always preaching to me about my health. He's 96 years old. You want to live to my age, you got to take care of yourself. So to kind of chill him out, I said, "Look, Uncle Marc, uh, um, I take care of my health. I get my regular examinations. In fact, yesterday I had my annual prostate exam to make sure I'm okay." And he said, "Good." I said, "Yeah, but I didn't like it." I said, "I had a fat finger, not enough lube, went in too deep. I think next year I'll see a doctor."
That's good.
Do me a favor, if your comedy ever brings you to any place in Florida,
Oh,
and Florida is a big state, I will come to see you.
oh,
I don't care where you are.
thank
If
you.
you're in Florida, I'll be there.
That's very kind of you to say. Thank you. I'm
I would consider it an honor.
I am really, without sounding too weird, but I am really appreciative of anyone who would say that. Thank you so much. I am.
Well, I have to tell you, you were our first guest, so it's easy for you to be our favorite guest. But I have a funny feeling that after 2-3 years of this, you're still going to be our favorite guest. You've
Well,
been sensational. What a
well,
great guy.
thank you.
It's such a pleasure to have met you.
Oh, thank you. Same here. Thanks for having me on.
I agree, Marc. It was just as cool. Excuse me, the second time around. And what are you working on right now? Is there anything you want
Yeah,
to part out
a
with?
couple of things. I have a sitcom that I'm with a producer in Colombia, actually, a bilingual sitcom called Tio Loco, about a younger version of myself who moves back to Colombia with his wife so she can take care of her mother. And it's this fish out of water where he kind of injects himself into this 13-member extended Colombian family. So the pilot's written and the episodes are outlined, and we've got some companies lined up that we're dealing with. I'm doing that. Just finished a screenplay called Who's Your Caddy? A comedy in the world of golf. And I am at the very beginning stages of developing a sitcom that takes place out here in the desert called Silverbacks. So
Interesting.
Sounds great. Well, we wish
Can't
you
wait
all,
for any of the movement on that. Wish you all the best on it.
we'll see,
And,
absolutely.
we'll see.
That'd be great. Well, we want to hear about it when it happens,
Oh,
because it will happen.
and the major thing, I'm halfway through a book about my life and career that I'm writing called Dumb Effin' Luck.
Excellent. I'll volunteer to be a reader for you.
Okay, I'll take it.
Absolutely.
Sir, thank you again. You've been amazing with your time, and,
All right.
and we really appreciate it. And anytime you want to come back on the Film Fury one, which we talk about all types of movies
Sure.
outside of horror, let me know. I'll chat with you for hours. I have no problem with that.
Thank you. You guys have
All
a good
right,
one.
take care.
Take care.
There's a little pet at my feet on her brand new cooling pillow that we just got for her. That's the lovely Mila. That's my baby. I am. Nope. Excuse me. Nope.
Doggy adventure.
No, it's the Roomba. So, yes.
That was the noise. Okay.
Yeah, that's the machines taking over.